welcome once again to the Tangent King Show. I am, of course, your humble servant, G. Michael Francis, and my preferred pronouns are 28, 29, and 30. And I'm here with my partner in crime, Mr. JJ Benks. How are you doing today, sir?
We shall defend our island home. We shall fight and not grow weary. We shall fight in the fields, and in the stores, and in the Walmarts, and in the parking lots, for our parking spaces from the German invader.
Thank you, Churchill from Wish. I broke him again.
This discount Churchill is most pleased by this sudden turn of events.
Anyway, of course. Wow, what a couple of weeks, huh? And before we begin, I just want to say a quick prayer. This is the start of the serious Catholic Mike jumping in here, and if you'll indulge me, I want to say a quick prayer with you guys on the show here. So, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Eternal rest grant unto her, O Lord, and may perpetual light shine upon her. May the soul of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and all the faithful departed through your sweet mercy, Jesus, rest in peace. Amen.
Amen.
In the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Of course, it's one of the topics that sort of came up in my mind tonight, and well, for tonight. I kind of wanted to make a video on it, just to share my own thoughts, but pretty much all I wanted to say about Her Majesty has already been said. Cite Michael Knowles and Andrew Clavin from the Daily Wire that pretty much sums up my sentiments. But there is one interesting character that popped up. I was just browsing on, I think it was Facebook one day, and I came across this character, one lady, and she is a character, right? One thing I love about British conservatives is their brutal honesty. Thanks. I sent you a picture of this, and I'm just gonna read it for our audience here. There you go.
Oh,
anyway,
a pipe in a week. So that's spicy.
So this is a British commentator by the name of Sophie Corcoran. Mm-hmm. And the way I'd sort of describe her, because I did a little research on her after discovering this tweet. She's pretty much Lady Thatcher and Tucker Carlson rolled up into a 19-year-old package. I mean, she's brutally honest. And, I just got to read this. This is brutal. All right, so she tweeted out, I think, was this yesterday? No, 2 days ago, where she said, "Dear Americans who mock us for mourning our beloved queen, she dedicated her entire life to her duty and to our country, even just 2 days before her death. You mourned a man who pointed a gun at a pregnant woman by burning cities to the ground. We are not the same."
Damn! Well, Mike, do you ever kind of just look back? I don't know how to put it, but do you ever just kind of look back on not well, there's a couple of different ways I could kind of take this discussion. Let me ask you this. Do you think that, do you have a lot of, well, I guess what are your thoughts kind of on the British monarchy in general, but also specifically the Queen?
Well, I think I've said this before on the show, and I stand by these comments, where I've always had this profound respect for Her Majesty. She was one of, her reign was just class, and it just, I'm at a loss for words at the moment. But she was, but in a way, she embodied Western culture. One thing that comes to mind, and I wish I'd remembered to bring this up before we started, was a line from her Christmas address in 1957, which pretty much summed up her entire reign. And I'll clip it in here for you here in just a second.
But it's not the new inventions which are the difficulty. The trouble is caused by unthinking people who carelessly throw away ageless ideals as if they were old and outworn machinery. They would have religion thrown aside, morality in personal and public life made meaningless, honesty counted as foolishness, and self-interest set up in place of self-restraint. At this critical moment in our history, we will certainly lose the trust and respect of the world if we just abandon those fundamental principles which guided the men and women who built the greatness of this country and Commonwealth.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's very thoughtful.
Yeah.
I've raved about Chesterton before, G.K. Chesterton before. There's, it's funny how I think in not just this modern time, but certainly in the 2000s, in the last 15 years, I look back on history and I kind of think to myself, and I don't think I'm the only one, where you have this it's almost like you have this historical blindness that everything is just black holed over the last like 40, 50 years. And the things people talk about, not even in the 60s, but have been talking about even before the Second World War, not just the important, that she's not just talking about the importance of tradition, but what people have been talking about is this movement of, you try to erase religion and tradition altogether. You see this push of, what would you call it? You call it National Socialism, or more specifically Marxist-Leninism, whatever. Those are kind of different things, but my point I'm trying to make here is that it's interesting to see them talking about something in such a way where they could say it now and it's still just as relevant. In fact, it's probably more relevant now than maybe even perhaps when she even said it in 57.
Exactly.
Like it's so spot on.
I mean, she was spot on, and I mean, I think one of the most beautiful things about her reign was that she did not express her political views in public, because her entire reign was about service before herself, which she had every right. She had every right, according to British law, to make her reign about herself. Because technically speaking, the sovereign is above the law in Great Britain.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think there's a video of her in when she was 21 on her 21st birthday, and where she says that, where she makes her pledge to the entire empire that her entire life is going to be devoted to her service, to its service, whether it be long or short. I'm thinking, what 20-year-old today would even come close to that kind of commitment?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 21-year-olds today, they're not even responsible enough to start a lawnmower.
No, largely not. It's certainly not in our generation. Zoomers, it depends on more of a case-by-case basis. I'm more optimistic about Zoomers, Gen Z, than I am about millennials, our generation. Because the millennials have had this, pampered, extended adolescence, and you see it extended into their 30s in some cases with these really immature, and they're supposed to be dads and parents and, reasonably testosterone-filled men who are in reasonable shape that could defend their families in a pinch, and they're just like, I like extra soy in my latte, sir. But she's got such a her head's screwed on straight. Like, obviously you can tell she's a bit nervous giving the address. She's much younger.
I mean, yeah, she was all of, I want to say 31 in that address.
She looks like she's 25, yeah.
Well, she was 25 when she took the throne in 1952.
Yeah. So she would have been in her 30s. But
yeah, 31, because she was born in 1926.
Yeah, she looks young. She
yeah,
looks young.
I mean, her father, George VI, God rest his soul, he actually died prematurely.
George, he was the king during World War II, correct?
Yes. And
Oh,
funny enough, Her Majesty, her late Majesty, actually drove an ambulance during the war, which
World War
actually
II?
bring. What was that?
World War II.
Yeah,
Wow.
she was I think 19 when the war ended.
Wow.
Yeah, but yeah, she was driving. She drove an ambulance for the British Army, and actually, there's a story. I'm not 100% sure if this is true, but this is a fun anecdote. She was hosting, I think, Saudi royalty. It may have been the Saudi king himself. I'm not 100% sure. But instead of getting the driver to drive them around, she drove them around herself,
Wow.
which was already enough of a statement because in Saudi Arabia, women are not allowed to drive. And here's the Queen of England driving them around. And apparently she gave them the ride of their lives, because, calling on her experience as an ambulance driver. I would have paid top dollar to see that.
Wow. That's such a level of humility because, and that's so rare, especially these days where people are like, oh, I'm above this kind of work. I'm above this kind of behavior. And she's just like literally service mode, not even thinking about herself to be like, oh, get him from point A to point B.
Like her emotions wouldn't even get in the way. I think the closest she ever came to showing her emotions was at a state dinner. I want to say 1995, 96, maybe 97. I can't remember which. Where she sort of stumbled when she gave the famous Annus Horribilis speech. Just saying that year in particular I think it was 95, where she said it was a terrible year.
92. It was 1992.
But the point is, she
Was that
wouldn't
when
even.
Diana died?
No, Diana died in 97.
97. Okay, because she was married to Charles, correct? And then they divorced,
Yes.
I think, or then she died.
Well, that's an interesting episode because Charles actually betrayed his fiance to marry Diana. Funny enough, the fiance that he betrayed is now the queen consort.
Queen consort, so that's
Camilla.
Really? So he cheated on
Camilla
her.
To marry Diane, and then when Diana cheated, he went back to Camilla.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah. In case you haven't noticed, I think Charles is His Majesty King Charles III is not exactly the greatest monarch that's ever graced the British throne. Let me just put it that way. He's an asshole.
Well, he may not have a long reign. That's kind of the unfortunate thing sometimes with children when they inherit not just inherit their parents' wealth, but they what's the phrase? Sometimes they are when they get something without earning it, sometimes it makes them just very entitled. I couldn't tell you anything about Charles because I don't know about him, but I was going to ask, so what is these days the way the British government's set up? What is exactly the role of the Queen and running affairs? Like, is it just sort of like she's sort of detached from the roles of government?
I've been getting conflicting answers on that myself, and it's hard to figure out which is which. But what it boils down to, and I'm just going to default to my mother-in-law's answer because she's British. Well, I will say before I start that, apparently I was wrong in my previous assessment of the Queen's power or the monarch's power. Essentially, the role of the monarchy is pretty much ceremonial.
Oh, just like Japan.
Pretty much. Although the monarch still retains the power to dissolve parliament. I know that much. Dissolve, not abolish.
What is dissolve? Basically, reappoint a new parliament?
Basically, yeah, it just says to the members of parliament, go home. We're going to hold another election.
They could probably use that, but the problem is who else do you elect?
Actually, she Her late Majesty actually exercised that power as recently as 2016.
Who was in power then?
You mean as prime minister?
Yeah.
Oh God.
Was it what was Tony Blair? Was it?
No, it wasn't Tony Blair. I want to say it was David Cameron.
David Cameron. Oh, I remember the name. Was he a Tory or Labour? Because I don't know anything about British politics.
He was Tory. And there's actually a lot more parties than just the Tories and the Liberals.
Yeah. So I mean, I know Boris Johnson was a Tory, just like
Yep.
Theresa May was a Tory.
Mm-hmm.
Boris was an interesting person, but a lot of people were hoping he'd be like a British
Yeah,
Trump, but he wasn't.
Yeah, and I take back my previous comments on him.
Yeah.
But
I think people were excited because it's like, oh, he's gonna do the things he says he's gonna do, but he got controlled pretty early on.
although from what I'm hearing with the new prime minister, who the Queen accepted just 2 days before her death.
Wait, does the Queen have the power to not accept the prime minister?
I honestly don't know. That's actually a question I never fully explored. I'll get back to that in a future episode.
Yeah.
Hey folks, Editing Mike here with an answer to that question. I did a little research and it turns out, on a technical level, yes, the sovereign does technically have the power to dismiss or reject an elected prime minister. Technically, yes. Practically, it's somewhat unclear. So anyway, that's my update.
But yeah, that was a good question. I never thought that would come up.
Yeah, because I'm really curious because I know that not just so many societies. I mean, we obviously were never part of we weren't a monarchy when we dissolved the British bonds, bro. It's interesting because I know that our country was certainly the anomaly in world history where, people.
Yeah, we took on the world's premier military power and we won.
Yeah. But not only just that, I mean, obviously the French and certain things certainly helped that, but I think just the fact that how the ferocious resistance we were putting, we should have a discussion on the American Revolution sometime. But the point is that it was the first government in history where it was the people had the power, and it wasn't a democracy. It was the people had the power to elect whatever government they wanted, and if it wasn't representative, they could dissolve their government and then appoint a new government. That's supposedly the power they're supposed to have. Certainly not the case now. But it's interesting kind of seeing how once our nation was there, seeing how other nations said, okay, they started to transition away from having a proper monarchy to having it be more ceremonial.
Which actually is another point that actually causes me a little bit of concern, is that in Britain right now there is a Republican movement, which the terms European and Republican rubs me the wrong way, especially the last time that was used.
When was the last time it was used?
French Revolution.
Oh, cute.
Okay, maybe it was used a few times after that, but the big one that comes to mind is the French Revolution, which is what I'm afraid, because that, in my mind, if the Republican movement in Britain becomes powerful enough, unless it, by some weird miracle, it adopts Madisonian principles, aka the principles of the founding principles of the United States.
Correct.
Best case scenario, we could be looking at French Revolution 2.0. Yeah, the re-emergence of Monsieur Guillotin. And the Republican wedding, which I promised I'd get back to some point.
We should have an episode where we talk about the French Revolution where I just ask questions because I really don't know a lot about it.
Oh, I'd love to brush up my knowledge and get back to you about the rebellion in the Vendée.
How about what if we did a couple episodes like that where we just talk about, okay, tell me about this historical subject, tell me about this historical subject, and then I can ask questions.
That's a good idea for a future video. But
we should do that.
What I'm getting at is, when it comes to the British monarchy, I support it as an institution. Obviously, I'm quite content with our Republican form of government, but I support the British monarchy as its own institution because the way I see it, it's the one link it has to its Christian past, to its Christian tradition. And like I said, you get rid of that. Best case scenario, we're looking at French Revolution 2.0, and I think even worst case scenario could even play out to Russian Revolution 2.0.
That'd be cute.
which scares me even more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a thought I had in mind too is the thought that's kind of marinating in my head is, how do you fix British society? And what I mean by that specifically, what I mean is, it seems like on so many different layers, you've got British society totally collapsing in on itself. Because it's like, I think that there's a growing, and there has been growing, this desire to return to a patriotic Britain that is a Britain for the native British. You
And
have
that's part of it. That's
yeah,
and of course we're outsiders trying to diagnose the problem.
of course, yeah. But I mean, you see a populist movement. You see that in Britain. You see that in many parts of Europe. I mean, certainly here, it seems like it's the most pronounced, and
Yeah.
it seems like it's the strongest here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you see that in Britain, and I really wish, because I'm probably a populist at heart, it's let Britain break away from all the ties of the European Union, let it get a control on its immigration problem,
Which it did, which it started under Brexit, led by the good old man Nigel Farage. I like that guy. He's good.
I wonder if he'll ever run as prime minister.
I think I'm pretty sure he was a member of parliament.
Yeah, I wonder, because I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure, would be happy to have him there. But anyway, my point is that there's an angst and there's a desire in a lot of these countries that have lived under socialism for so long, they're just sick of it. And they're at a point where it's like, okay, the elites have decided you're only allowed to fight for yourself or do these certain things under these certain channels, and then you're basically like, oh, so I can't do justice, or I can't argue my case in a law setting. So what instruments are we left with? And it's like, well, you're left with armed revolution, and good luck getting arms because you don't have any arms.
It's almost like we have arsenal of democracy somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate it when I use that word in a positive context.
Arsenal of democracy.
I hate democracy, but I love the republic.
Agreed. It's good you make that distinction. Speaking of arms, did you hear that American Express and
yes, and Visa,
MasterCard,
shameful.
they're all going to start flagging arms purchases.
Shameful.
Yeah, so that's not right, because obviously it's just like, what's another step they can do just to.
And I love how all of a sudden every leftist is now an economic libertarian. Like, oh, the private companies, they can do whatever they want. I mean, yeah, until they start acting as a de facto arm of the government.
Well, the funny thing, I'll say this very briefly because I know we're short on time, but that a lot of leftists, they screech. They're at a point where they screech and they flail around, and they're so, in some cases, violently angry or metaphorically foaming at the mouth, sometimes literally, where it's that they just jump to any grasping at straw argument just to justify the use of ban the opposition, block this person, kick them out of society, imprison them, throw them in jail, any kind of use of government, abuse of government force in any capacity.
Which reminds me, Mr. President Mussolini called. He said, "I want my set back."
But it's any use of just that kind of force. So it's like, what moral argument can I make up today in order to justify this end?
Which is rich coming from the, morals are, rightly speaking, are based on truth, which is really rich coming from the side that rejects any notion of truth.
Yeah, it's literally, they'll adopt any position and contort any shape. It's like a giant gelatinous ditto with the eyes of Sauron blazing out of it. They'll adopt any shape in order to win. Well, they're at a point where they're having a lot of trouble doing that anymore. I don't know. I'm curious how things are going to ramp up here in the U.S., but as far as the Queen's concerned, it might be a while since we have.
Well, it certainly
forever again.
I think the only impact Her Late Majesty's passing is going to have on us is that it took the mask off of a lot of people. I mean, of course, you have the state elites who just send off empty letters. And
Meghan Markle's
oh God. Don't get me started on that.
that
Yeah, that's gonna get quacked out. But oh, if only we had more than a minute and a half left. Well, I mean, we wanted to get some more things today, but this was just so much of an engaging discussion.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you don't see people pointed out before that you also have this monarchy movement in the right that's kind of waiting in the wings that I want us to get back to a
Oh,
liberty-loving republic, I don't want us to have a monarchy here in the U.S.
actually, there's another way I'm a monarchist. I support the social reign of Christ the King. You can clap now. Like Pelosi said about the Inflation Reduction Act.
What's that line from Road El Dorado?
Yeah. Anyway, we are running out of time. We have less than a minute, so I just want to say thank you all so much for watching, and be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and one of these days we got to get Sophie Cochran on the show. We got to do an interview with her sometime.
Fantastic.
But anyway,
Ashton Martin.
we love you guys. Pax et bonum. Good night.